It's one of the great things about community banking. We're at your baseball games. We see you in the grocery store. A lot of our customers are our friends.
Welcome to Why Guarantee. Thank you so much for listening today. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on the episode. I'm Chelsea Reber, and today I am joined by Buffy Dyess. Buffy, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about your role at Guaranty Bank and where you're located.
Okay, I'm the bank's Senior Vice President, Chief Compliance Officer, and I office out of Longview, Texas.
So you originally completed a degree in criminal justice. What pushed you towards the banking industry?
Well, it's kind of interesting, but my mom was a banker, so I grew up in banking. I really didn't have any interest in being a banker. It was a job for me while I was going to college, and I was fortunate. I worked for a great community bank that I started with. Once I got my degree, the area I was planning on going to would have been in government service. However, there was a hiring freeze at the state I lived in at the time. So I stayed at the bank, really found my niche there. The Community Reinvestment Act, CRA, was a regulation that underwent a huge change back in the 90s. And at that time, I was working at that bank, and they saw my interest in that area and asked if I would take on the changes at the bank and help implement them. And it was great because I was very community-minded and service-minded, and so it was really a way to connect my love of government and law with being very community-oriented. And that's how I got started in compliance, and I've been doing it ever since.
You have worked in compliance for a while. What are things that would surprise people about working in compliance?
Well, I think it was the same thing that originally surprised me. First of all, I was amazed at the number and depth of regulations banks are required to follow. It's really amazing when you start looking at it. But I think one of the surprising things is CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act. I don't believe there's any other industry that is required to actually serve the communities that they're in the way that CRA requires financial institutions to do that. Under that regulation, banks are required to offer services to their low to moderate income individuals in their communities, as well as the low to moderate income areas. They're required to do certain lending, investments. It's really in-depth, and I think people are pretty surprised about that with banking.
Has there been anything that you haven't enjoyed about your experience in compliance?
Yes and no. I mean, I absolutely love what I do.
Sure.
And I have since the very first that I started in compliance, but I think sometimes the challenge is finding that balance between what the law says and also making sure that the bank is giving really good customer service and continuing to do that. The perspective I take on it is if you're offering great customer service, it really lends itself to also being compliant. But I think it can be a little bit challenging sometimes, especially, you are a member of the banking team. And at times they can feel like you're not because you're telling them no.
Sure.
But I know from our department's perspective, we really try to take a different approach where, if a regulation doesn't allow us to do something, what does it allow us to do? How can we, continue to innovate and do things that the bank wants to do for its customers while still remaining in the goalposts of a regulation?
Instead of just saying no, maybe no, but let's see what else we can do.
Exactly.
Yeah. What eventually brought you to Guaranty Bank?
Okay, first let me just say I absolutely love Guaranty Bank and Trust. I love community banking, and so I've really always been a community banker.
And quickly, let's talk about the difference then. When you say community bank, what are you comparing that to? Is it corporate bank? Is that what you're saying is more enjoyable for you?
Yes. Community banks tend to be smaller.
Okay.
They're not humongous, and I'm not going to call out any other banks, but they're not banks that are typically all over the United States, okay? So there's just more of a hometown feel to them. There's a lot more connectedness, I think, and that comes from the top down. When you are in a huge corporation, you typically aren't going to know your CEO and your board members or even your senior vice presidents or executive vice presidents. I mean, we have direct line to upper management here, which is really important to me. It's also really important to me to work for a company that's very community involved, and you get that with community banks.
Sure. And so what did bring you to Guaranty Bank? What was that path like?
Well, they were looking for a compliance officer. I was at another community bank before I came here, and they asked me to interview here, and I did. I did quite a bit of research on the bank before I even agreed to interview, and I was just very impressed with what I saw. Not only have they been around for a long time, I understood who their management was and what their position on compliance was. And especially after I interviewed with the bank, it was very clear that they operate from a position of integrity, honesty, and ethics. And of course, being a compliance officer, that was extremely important to me. During the interview, it was really clear that they support the compliance effort from the top down. And that's what I've experienced the entire time I've been here. Doesn't mean we always agree on an approach we need to take to something, but compliance always has a seat at the table here at Guaranty. And I promise you that is not everywhere. Even at community banks, that's not always the case. And so I'm very appreciative of that. I appreciate that management respects compliance and what we have to do, and also our goals. And it's just great to be able to pick up the phone and talk to who you need to talk to directly.
Let's talk about fraud prevention. This is kind of a thorny topic.
Yes.
Give us some of your take on fraud prevention, especially where it is in today's world.
Okay. I will say here at Guaranty, we actually do have a fraud department that's separate from the compliance department. But what I love that's great about here is we are intertwined. We work very closely together. When there are particular fraud cases, they're contacting my department. We're having conversations. We're looking out for our customers. That's very important to me also that we're doing that. Fraud is huge, and I can't stress enough that it is on the increase. You heard probably for a long time, checks are going away. Well, they're not. With the idea of checks going away meant check fraud would go away. But what's interesting is the last few years we've actually seen an uptake in check fraud. A lot of that comes from mail theft and things like that. So, that's a big area of fraud. But I think the biggest area of fraud that not only gives quite a number of us heartburn, but breaks our hearts, is elder financial abuse. That is another area that is on the increase. And I just can't stress enough that we need to be watching out for our elders. It's great that technology is available, and I'm not bashing technology. It's wonderful. We can get on Facebook. We can talk to family all over the United States and in other countries. We can connect with people through there who we probably wouldn't. But it's also rampant with fraud, romance fraud, elder financial abuse, even text messages. I mean, we are seeing our elders receive text messages from fraudsters, and it'll be a text message that says something really simple like, "Oh, I haven't heard from you in a while." They don't recognize the number, but they start communicating with this person. Right. And before you know it, they're giving them access to all of their financial information, how to log into their bank accounts. They're giving them social security numbers. It's scary and it's sad. And it's not just people who don't understand banking or don't understand fraud. We're seeing people do this who are really smart, normally cautious people giving out their information. They think that they're investing in things where they're seeing these huge returns. And I come back to, if it's too good to be true, it is. Do not give out your personal financial information to anybody. Even your banker is not going to ask for your PIN number, right, or tell you to make payments in cards.
Right. Don't go buy gift cards
because
that's what they want. Exactly. And obviously there's some personal responsibility, but I'm assuming there's some responsibility of the bank too to help the customer in these situations.
Absolutely. There's a huge responsibility on the bank, and especially with elder financial abuse. There's actually a number of state laws. Texas is one of those states that have laws doing that, protecting our elders and those who are vulnerable, where we have to actually monitor accounts. We are required by law to pay attention to things, and when there is a suspicion, we have requirements sometimes to report that, to contact APS. So I know it can be frustrating sometimes to customers. They feel like we're in their business, but it's our job to protect the financial well-being of our customers, and so we take that very seriously, particularly in my department. It's very important to all of us that our vulnerable customers especially aren't being taken advantage of. And I just can't stress enough, when you hear from your banker, talk to them, go to the bank, ask questions. Just really be responsive when they're inquiring about things. Don't take it as an affront that we don't trust what you're doing. But, we're trying to protect you from the fraudsters, and it is rampant.
Well, I go back to what you said about Guaranty Bank having that hometown feel, because it is a smaller bank. And obviously
Yes.
money is a very personal topic. And so to be able to know who your banker is, and if there is a situation like that, it seems like that would be a perfect reason to bank with someone like Guaranty.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the great things about community banking. We're at your baseball games. We see you in the grocery store. A lot of our customers are our friends, and the bank creates those personal relationships. I know this is a day and age where you oftentimes do everything online, including your banking, which is great. I mean, those are great tools to have. But it's also great to know your banker. Come into the bank, meet your banker, ask questions, don't hesitate. I know all of our bankers would prefer to have that personal relationship with you than not. And part of the reason is because of fraud. If we see anomalies, we're going to know better who you are if we've got that personal relationship with you.
You discussed the elder abuse and something that you're obviously very passionate about. Are there any other causes that you're able to pursue while being at Guaranty?
Absolutely. Again, community banking, we're very heavily involved in the communities that we are in. That includes a lot of our nonprofits. I mentioned, we're at your baseball games.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you'll see banks listed as your sponsors. Guaranty is a huge sponsor of our nonprofits and our schools. I know for me personally, I'm involved in East Texas CASA. It's an important organization where we educate and train volunteers who serve as advocates for kids in foster care. They represent them in court, and we have a number of our locations where our staff is involved in the CASAs of their areas. But it's been a great partnership for me, and I love that my employer supports that. They sponsor our events, our 5Ks, our annual big fundraiser. Plus, I spend a lot of time volunteering. I've been on the board at East Texas CASA for a long time. And so they support that. They support my time away from the bank where I'm involved in that. One of the great benefits we have here at Guaranty is that all of our staff is given 8 paid volunteer hours to actually go volunteer in the community.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier this is a requirement of CRA. However, Guaranty is one of those banks where it's not done because it's a requirement of a regulation. They do it because they understand and support the communities that we're in. It's very important, particularly rural communities and smaller communities. If you took out the community banks, those communities would fall apart. And we've seen that happen in rural communities. When the bank has to close for some reason or go away, it's a huge detriment to the community. Your banks are sponsoring and helping to pay for school supplies and train people on financial literacy. They're involved in your homeless shelters, all those things. And Guaranty is just a huge supporter of those things. So it's just another great thing about working at Guaranty.
I know you said compliance isn't everyone's favorite subject when it comes to banking, but what do you want our viewers to get from this episode?
Compliance is important. Trust that your bank, Guaranty Bank and Trust, is working hard to do what's right. I think also, just as another takeaway, as a side note, get involved in your communities. It's really important. Pay attention to fraud, be fraud aware. Pay attention to what Guaranty's doing. Go out to our Facebook page, all of our social media, and don't forget about our mascot and his Facebook. Cash has a lot of social media out there, and he's great to follow.
A great follow, Cash from Guaranty Bank.
Yes.
Love that. Buffy, thank you so much for joining us today on Why Guaranty.
Thank you. It's been fun.
And thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to find more information about Guaranty Bank, check out their website at gnty.com. The link is in the description below.